We're going to get started, and I'll just make sure that folks sort of roll in um, as they arrive. But if folks who are not speaking could mute themselves, that would be wonderful. My name is Andrew Sondry. I'm the chair of the Germantown Democratic Club. Um, and this is the UpCounty Democrats Monthly Breakfast. We are a coalition of Democratic clubs from across the UpCounty. And so really appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your morning to be here with us. Um, I do want to do a brief land acknowledgement, and then we'll move on to the conversation of the day. So we'd like to begin by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands served by the Piscataway people. We honor America's first people and all elders past, present, and emerging, and we are called upon to learn and share what we learn about the tribal history, culture, and contributions that have been suppressed by the telling of the story of America. Um, and with that out of the way, I would like to say welcome to our guests this morning. We will be hearing from Council Vice President Andrew Friedson, um, as well as Sarah, and let me know if I'm pronouncing your last name correct, Redinger, from Habitat for Humanity, um, about affordable housing projects that are going on in the UpCounty, and really across the county, because we are one sort of shared housing market. Um, so I'm going to go first to the council member, and then we'll go to you, Sarah, and then we'll jump into some of the questions. But thank you all for being here.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's great to be here with all of you, and especially with Sarah, who has been a great partner. Sarah and I have worked on a number of different affordable housing projects over the last several years, and Habitat is really an example of the public-private partnerships that we can forge. And actually, Habitat sits at this perfect dynamic at this current moment, since they, in many ways, started as a faith-based organization, but have transitioned to a more traditional nonprofit, at least operationally, but not in terms of their mission. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both, because I think our partnerships with both traditional nonprofits in the housing sector and faith-based organizations that have important missions are often at the forefront of advocating for affordable housing, but don't have resources, and the county can leverage their assets, their land, and other things that they do have in ways that can help to address their mission, but also the county's needs. And so some exciting things in the pipeline related to that. The first thing is we have a housing crisis. We do not have nearly enough housing for people who need it, and that is a huge challenge. And it's actually a challenge at every income level. So unless you are exorbitantly wealthy, which is very few, if any, people, it is very difficult to afford a place to live that suits your needs, that suits your family's needs, that suits the needs of you individually and collectively. And that creates a moral problem, but also an economic development problem, and even an environmental problem, an environmental sustainability problem, because it forces greater impacts on sustainability than otherwise would be had if we had a more efficient distribution of people to the desirability of where they want to live and where they need to go. And so that's one of the reasons why it's been a key focus of mine. I currently chair the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. I previously served on the previous iteration of the committee that oversees housing. And I will say, I think over the last 5 years, we have done more to address the housing crisis than in any 5-year period in the county's history. I'm very proud of that. But we have a lot more work to do, and I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done. So some of the things that we've done. I'm very proud of the Housing Production Fund that I championed, working together with colleagues. This is a $100 million fund that streamlines the Housing Opportunity Commission's pipeline, and it's made possible a number of projects, including ones that are happening in the UpCounty. A good example is a new project, Garnkirk, in Clarksburg. That's at Shawnee Lane and Observation Drive. It's 184 garden-style apartments. It is just in the early stages, so if you're asking, I haven't seen that, or how do I sign up, it's not quite at that point yet. But it is a key part of our affordability. And I will say that organizations like HOC and some of our nonprofits that have not as traditionally operated in the UpCounty are increasingly seeing that as a focus area because of all of the needs that exist there. So a number of other examples as well. We had a bill, the first bill of this term was a co-location bill on county land to change the process for how the county deals with its own properties to make sure that we're prioritizing housing. That has long been a commitment in our words, but not always in our deeds. And so that was a bill that I introduced and that this council passed. I will say it had, I think, 15 co-sponsors. So it was the most co-sponsored bill in the history of Montgomery County. And I think it may stand the test of time because it spanned between one and the other. Unlike the General Assembly, our bills don't expire at the end of the term. And so it carried over from the last term into this term and was ultimately the first major bill that this council passed. So excited about that the county government has to lead in this area, and it's where the public-private partnership conversation comes in. I work together with Councilmember Sales. I think Roland is on the call representing her today. A mixed income community ZTA. This changes the regulatory review process to make it much easier to build affordable housing if you meet certain thresholds. It reduces the regulatory burdens, just to give you a sense, by about 75%. Now, good news, bad news on that. The good news is it significantly reduces it for affordable housing projects, major affordable housing projects. The bad news is there are 75% to reduce. So we have work to do in that, and we're continuing to take on some efforts, and stay tuned because there are a couple legislative initiatives that I have moving forward to address that. We've been leveraging county-owned land in really exciting ways. I'm sure Sarah will talk about Randolph Road. This is a project that we leveraged county land. We worked together with partners like Habitat and AHC. And together, we have one of the most significant affordable housing projects currently going on right now in the region. I won't go into too many details on that because I'm sure Sarah has that ready to go. But it is an example when everybody puts in something, when the county puts in money and land, when the state comes in with financial support, there's federal support there as well. There's significant private dollars. Sarah will talk about, I believe, over $1 million in private philanthropic dollars that made that project possible. And it is the first of its kind. It's unique in its affordability and its ability to provide home ownership opportunities as well as rental opportunities. That's also an area that we really need to work on. I have really tried to increase the programs that we have for vulnerable homeowners who are at risk of losing their homes, and also for those who can't access their homes, to expand our first-time home buyer tax credits. We have long focused on the rental side of things, which is important, but we have not and don't really have many tools at our disposal on the home ownership side of it. And that's why I'm really glad that you have invited Sarah here, because Habitat really is at the forefront of many of those initiatives, and we've been partnering with them in a number of ways. We have Emery Grove. I passed the zoning changes for Emery Grove, but that has been a layered approach. Habitat is part of that as well. Pastor Warner, who's an incredible transformational leader. That was an example of a former thriving Black community that was devastated by so-called urban renewal, and it has left its church. And the remnants of what was a major stop in Black baseball in this community, and what was one of the most important places for camp outings for the African American community through the 20th century, the first half of the 20th century in particular, where tens of thousands of residents from all up and down the East Coast and even points west would descend upon Emery Grove. We're now turning that into a affordable housing inclusive community, and we are restoring some of the great community treasures to their previous glory, and honoring the past. That doesn't happen without the church. That doesn't happen without Habitat for Humanity. That doesn't happen without zoning changes. That doesn't happen without significant financial support from the county and the state. So it's just a perfect example of the restorative justice that we're doing, but also the requirements to do public-private partnership. None of the challenges that we face in housing and really in any of the major vexing challenges that we have can be solved with government alone. And that's really where the nonprofit sector, the faith-based sector, really play a significant part. On the heels of the $100 million housing production fund, I have been working for several years now. I'm excited. I think it's going to launch this year. Nonprofit preservation fund. This will be to preserve our existing naturally occurring affordable housing. And that is intended to build up over time to be a $50 million fund. I'm very excited about the possibilities for that as well. Number of projects that we have. The Laureate is an example. I don't know if anybody has read the New York Times over the last several months, but there was a great feature article that really focused on the Laureate, which is by Shady Grove Metro. And the Laureate was the first project of the $100 million housing production fund, and wouldn't have been able to happen without it, with the affordability levels that it had. And it was featured as an example around the country of ways that social housing, mixed income public housing can happen with public-private partnership. It's a private developer, it has nonprofit support, but it is the Housing Opportunity Commission's use of the fund that I champion, the Housing Production Fund that has made it possible. And then there's a number of other projects that we have that are utilizing 25% MPDU levels and beyond. One example, Victory Haven, is a senior affordable housing unit. It's 70 affordable housing project. It's 72 units. 68 are affordable at some level, so it's overwhelmingly affordable. And then we have a number of other projects as well. Another senior affordable project is Milestone Germantown, which is a mixed income community, and I could go through. There's about 6 to 8 in the process, in the works right now, that are exceeding affordability levels, creating mixed income communities. So I don't want to go on too long. There's lots of other initiatives that we've undertaken, a payment in lieu of taxes bill that partners with nonprofits to allow them to be able to operate in the private sector a little bit easier. We're taking up the right of first refusals bill. Both of those are opportunities for the county to intervene in the private market, or for the county to help nonprofit affordable housing providers to be able to compete in a very difficult housing market, to be able to access public dollars and nonprofit dollars to be able to maintain or create affordability that otherwise wouldn't exist. So we have a lot of tools at our disposal. We have been focusing on this like never before, but we have a lot more work to do. The challenges of the number of people in our community who are cost burdened and rent burdened is enormous. The difference between what our community members make and how much you need to purchase a home, and the reality that generational wealth building and wealth in general is tied directly to homes. And if we could go back and redo that, that's probably not a great model, to be perfectly honest with you, for a lot of different reasons. There are some moral challenges that intersect with economic realities for families that create some really uncomfortable dynamics with very significant, unfortunate outcomes. But that is the model that we're at. I say a lot, at the local level, we can only nurture nature. And so we have to intervene in the ways that we can. And the best way for us to intervene, the most effective way that we have proven that we can intervene, is through partnership with communities, with nonprofits, with faith-based organizations. And stay tuned on that as well. I'm working with Kate Stewart for a faith-based initiative that is really based on the similar mindset as I mentioned earlier on the county land. We can't reach the goals that we have, the significant Council of Governments housing targets that we have committed to as a region and as a county, unless we are taking advantage of all the assets that we have. And one of the main assets besides public owned land is land that is owned and controlled by faith-based organizations that have missions that want to support affordable housing, but don't necessarily have the means to do so. And we can help them to do that by making it easier for those partnerships to happen. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. I'll yield back to you and allow Sarah to chime in as well. And appreciate you allowing me to join here this morning.
All righty. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the insight, Council Vice President. I am going to pass now to Sarah Redinger, who is the Vice President of Community Development at Habitat for Humanity in Metro Maryland. And Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with you all this morning, and especially excited to be here with Councilmember Friedson, who's been just a phenomenal partner, both for Habitat and affordable housing generally around the county. I'm going to share a couple of slides. I thought I would start this morning. It looks like I'm unable to share. Do you mind?
Yes, I can give you that ability. Just a second.
So I thought I'd start this morning just sharing a little bit of information about the home ownership challenges facing the county. It's not something that we talk about, I don't think, as much as rental. And then I can dive a little bit deeper into what Habitat is doing in terms of direct service. And then also some of our work on advocacy and issues that we see as priorities coming up. All right. So as you know, because you live here, Montgomery County is incredibly expensive. The slides that I'm going to share with you were shared by the planning department for the council earlier this year. But if you're looking at the average sold price for single family detached homes last year, it was about $940,000. It is incredibly expensive to purchase a home in Montgomery County. That does drop pretty significantly for attached homes. So if you're looking at townhomes and condos, drops to a little over $420,000. But one of the challenges we see a lot with townhomes and with condos is the fact that they have very high association fees. So even if they have a more affordable sales price, those association fees oftentimes make those units unaffordable to folks at lower incomes. If you look at the way that units are financed, I think this is particularly interesting. That green bar there at the top are FHA loans. And FHA loans as a means for financing home purchase in Montgomery County has been shrinking. FHA loans are typically lower income buyers. They're typically first-time home buyers. And so there are fewer and fewer of those loans as we look at how people are financing buying homes in Montgomery County. And then if you take a look at this slide, this is comparing, this is something that Councilmember Friedson mentioned as well, owner households by income range. And you can see that 2010 compared to 2021, the only income range that increased in a percentage of owner occupied units were folks earning $150,000 or more. Every other income range is losing owner occupied units. And then of course, if you look at this through an equity lens, you see sort of very similar trends, right? The only race or ethnicity that increased between 2010 and 2021 in owner-occupied units were white households. Every other race and ethnicity is losing households or owner-occupied households. So what do we do about this? We have to make homeownership more affordable. And that has been Habitat for Humanity's mission since 1976. We were founded in rural Georgia, not by Jimmy Carter, but by somebody who ended up working quite closely with him. And we were founded on Koinonia Farm, which is this interracial faith community where people of all races live together, work together, prayed together, ate together. And it was founded in the 50s. So you can imagine how controversial that was at the time. But Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat, ended up staying at this community. And this is where the vision for Habitat for Humanity came from, that every single person on this planet deserves a decent place to call home. We're now the world's largest nonprofit builder, and we've helped 46 million people around the world get into safe, decent, and affordable homes. So what we do is we work through local affiliates, which is what our affiliate is. We serve Montgomery and Prince George's County, and we've been around for a little over 40 years. And we sort of function very differently than a lot of other builders and nonprofits. We are a licensed general contractor, so we have a new home construction license. We are also a home remodeler, so we have an MHIC license. And then on top of that, we're also the lender. So when we build homes, we sell them and provide an affordable mortgage. So we're actually underwriting our own mortgages in-house, and we're providing a 30-year, 0% interest, 1% down payment mortgage to our buyers to make sure that folks are getting into homes that they can afford in the long term. So we do our work through kind of two different ways. Our direct service programs that work directly with folks who need to get into housing or need to preserve their housing. And then we've also really expanded our work in terms of advocacy to try and make broader change. So in terms of direct service, we have a couple of different home purchase programs. We can build new construction, we can build single family detached homes, duplexes, townhomes. We're doing our first condo project, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is the Randolph Road project. And then we can also rehabilitate vacant distressed properties that are in really bad condition. And all of those homes are then sold to lower income families that are living and working in our communities, but can't access home ownership through the traditional market. We also have a number of different home preservation programs as well. So working with folks who already own their homes, but maybe need to replace a roof, they don't have heat, need to do accessibility modifications, and then really focusing in on climate resiliency as well, and making sure that folks of lower incomes have equitable access to climate resiliency measures like weatherization and solar. And then we also have a couple of restores that take in donated and gently used furniture and home goods and resell those, and all the funds help to help build houses. So since our existence, we have completed 872 projects across our local jurisdictions and invested more than $25 million in the local community. So as I mentioned, our home purchase program is really available to folks who are lower income, but still can be very successful homeowners, but just can't access home purchase through the traditional market because it's so expensive and difficult to qualify for a mortgage. So what we do is we find opportunities to build, and then we select buyers for those particular opportunities. Our buyers are selected very early on in the process, usually 9 months to a year in advance, so that they can complete literally hundreds of hours of what we call sweat equity. So actually helping to build their homes if they're physically able, doing a lot of workshops on home maintenance, how to get homeowners insurance, civic engagement, and all sorts of different things. And then Habitat, again, underwrites the mortgage, sells the home, and then the homeowners pay their mortgage, and every time they do, that helps us build more homes. And then this is just sort of a general kind of slide on the folks that typically qualify to purchase homes with Habitat. So we're talking about teachers, we're talking about folks who work for the police department or the fire department. We're talking about folks in direct service, right? They might work at restaurants or drive taxis and things like that. So folks that you're interacting with on a daily basis that really just cannot afford to buy a home and start building wealth in this county. And so one of our main focus areas moving forward, and this really kind of gets back to what Councilmember Friedson was talking about, was this idea of partnership with government, partnership with other nonprofits to make sure that we can expand our ability to serve more people. And I think the Randolph Road project is a really great example of that. So this is the old Roundhouse Theater site. It was county-owned land that the county put out for RFP for the development of affordable housing on the site. And Habitat co-applied with AHC, another nonprofit that builds affordable rental housing, and we're successful in winning the RFP. So we are in the process, actually under construction and building 195 deeply affordable units. These will be rental and then also home ownership. And this co-location of ownership and rental, I think, is a really important idea. Home ownership is incredibly expensive to build. We are subsidizing every unit that we build by between $100,000 and $150,000, sometimes $200,000 per unit. And we do not have access to the same financing sources that are available for rental. So some of you may know that a lot of affordable rental projects rely on low-income housing tax credits for financing. There is not a program like that on the ownership side. And so when we can co-locate with large amounts of rental units, they can access that financing and we can build off of economies of scale and really drive down the cost for home ownership. And so our subsidy per unit, even though we're doing deeply affordable home ownership units, has dropped to generally below $100,000 per unit on this project. So that co-location is really key. I think the other benefit of co-location, and this is something that I mentioned earlier, but those association fees can be really challenging and really high. We are building condos on this site, but what we are doing is we're sharing site maintenance cost with 195 units, sharing them with the rental units rather than just relying on the condos to take care of that. And that will help drive down the condo fees for folks purchasing those units as well. And this is a really cool project, right? We've got this huge half-acre park that goes up through the middle of the site. We're going to have on-site childcare in one of the larger rental buildings. All of the folks will have access to a fitness center. There's also MocoNet, so the county's internet service, already on the site because it was county-owned land. And so we're going to be able to provide extremely low-cost internet to everybody that lives on this site. Of course, it's fully electric because we are committed to building climate-resilient buildings. And we're right on a future BRT line, which is really exciting. So super excited about this project. We're going to be selecting home buyers probably starting early next year. So happy to share more information on that if folks are interested. The other project that Councilmember Friedson mentioned was Emery Grove up in Gaithersburg, and we are incredibly honored and excited to be a part of this project. As the council member mentioned, the Emery Grove United Methodist Church is really the only remaining piece of that original community. And they've created a CDC and are really driving the redevelopment vision of this neighborhood so that we can build something that is reminiscent of the neighborhood that was there, that honors the history of that community, but also welcomes the new residents that already live in that area. And so Habitat is partnering with Emery Grove UMC and with HOC and with the county to hopefully start building some affordable townhomes for ownership. Best guess is maybe 4 or 5 years, hopefully a little bit sooner, but that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at right now. But again, just to underscore the partnership that it took, I mean, in order to even start this process, we had to get a ZTA passed to change the zoning, and Councilmember Friedson sponsored that and was really instrumental in helping move this along. The other piece of what we do is home preservation, right? So we're not going to build our way out of the housing crisis that we have. We have to make sure that we are keeping the existing affordable housing stock affordable. And as we know, as folks start to age, or if they lose a job or, take a job that has a lower income, it can be a struggle to maintain a home. And home preservation is really critically important for a number of reasons. The first is that transfer of generational wealth, right? If folks are losing their homes, they're losing that generational wealth for future generations. We also want to make sure that folks are living in homes that are healthy and safe and energy efficient and homes that they can afford. We also have an aging population. And most of the homes in our county are not accessible. And so as folks age, it's incredibly difficult for them to stay in their homes if they don't have help making sure that they are accessible. And then there's also, in addition to kind of a physical health benefit of improving a home, there's a huge mental health benefit that we don't talk about enough. That pride and ownership and the dignity of where you live is incredibly important for mental health and well-being. And I'll share the slide deck if you're interested. These are all links to different programs that we operate, but all of our programs are repair-based. So looking at health and safety needs, like I said, replacing a lot of roofs, replacing furnaces, electric issues, plumbing issues. If it's health and safety, we can take a look at it. Also do a lot of energy efficiency programs. We administer the Montgomery County Homeownership Energy Efficiency Program, this MESEEP program, it's sort of a quick-based program that can do appliance replacements and other energy efficiency modifications that can make sort of a quick change in energy bills. We also administer the Home Accessibility Rehabilitation Program, or HARP. And again, this is one that Councilmember Friedson was instrumental in funding. He really led the charge on using some of the county's ARPA dollars, so the federal funding, to fund this program and really expand it. And so this program helps older adults and folks living with disabilities in the county make accessibility modifications to their homes so that they can safely remain in place. And then we offer a number of other accessibility and climate resiliency programs as well. And again, snapshot of how to qualify for those programs as well. And then we have 2 restores. I don't know if you all have been to either of them. They take donated furniture, appliances, anything that goes into your home, basically resell them at a discounted price. So they provide lower cost options to folks living in the community. But again, all of the proceeds help us build homes in the county. And then finally, I want to switch from sort of direct service to advocacy. Again, knowing that we can't build our way out of this program and knowing that we are limited in the number of folks that we can serve every year, we have really focused in on advocacy over the past probably 8 years as a means to make broader change that can affect a lot more people. And so our 4 sort of overarching policy priorities are focused on increasing and preserving affordable housing, equitably increasing access to credit. We know that oftentimes the way that credit is given out and decided on is not equitable. Optimizing land use for affordable homes, and ensuring access and development of communities of opportunity. So making sure that every single community out there has access to jobs and transit and healthy foods and healthcare. So for the upcoming year, our main focuses are around property taxes. As we continue to see those go up, they become a struggle for folks who already own their homes to stay in their homes. And so figuring out how to work with the state to see if we can expand property tax credit programs for older adults and for folks at lower incomes. But property taxes are also a challenge for folks trying to purchase homes, right? So the way that Habitat works is that we make sure that our buyers are not paying more than 30% of their income on housing when we sell a house. 30% is considered affordable. And when property taxes continue to take up a larger and larger share of that percentage, our mortgage amount is what decreases, which means that we have to increase the subsidy per unit. And so property taxes can be a real challenge for first-time homebuyers as well as for folks who already own their homes. We're also focused on expanding access to down payment assistance. Again, this is an area where Councilmember Friedson has worked to expand the amount of money available for down payment assistance in Montgomery County, which is fantastic. We're looking to see if we can continue to increase that and maybe even explore ways to increase the amount available for down payment assistance to sort of help buy down the affordability level when folks are purchasing. Of course, we always need subsidy dollars for both development and preservation so that we're able to leverage those with our private funders. As an example, on Randolph Road, Habitat's portion of that project is about $10 million. I think the total development cost for both Habitat and HHC is around $95 million. But of our $10 million, we raised 1.5 of that through a capital campaign. So private businesses and donors living and working in our community who believe in the mission of providing access to affordable homeownership. And then the county provided $2 million that we'll take out with future fundraising and grants as well. So that public-private partnership and access to subsidy dollars is really critical in making sure that these projects can happen. And then the prioritization of public and faith-owned land for housing. Land is incredibly expensive. If we're buying it through the private market, right, and paying market rate prices for that land, it's incredibly difficult to make the numbers work, particularly for homeownership. So continuing to explore ways that we can use public and faith-owned land to expand access to affordable housing. So I will stop there and happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that presentation, Sarah. And I really appreciate the opportunity to learn about some of those projects in a little bit more depth. I know I've heard a little bit about the Emerald Grove one, so it was nice to learn a little bit more about the Randolph Road one. There have been a lot of great questions that were pre-submitted, as well as a number of questions in the chat. But before I dive into the questions, I do want to recognize some of the elected officials who are here with us today because I forgot to do that at the top. We have Councilmember Lorianne Sales, or perhaps a representative from Councilmember Sales' office. We have Sheriff Max Wee, and then we have Delegate Leslie Lopez, and a couple of Democratic Central Committee members, the chair of the Montgomery County Democratic Party, Saman Kadir Ahmad, Central Committee member from District 9A, Isa Haddad, Central Committee member at large, Peter Witzler. And then we have the leaders of all of our clubs and caucuses who are co-sponsors with us, Kathy Durkowski, Gail Cheek, Sharon Cranford, and Ellie Shaw Belbladia. So thank you all so much for the work that you all put in as well. But to dive back into the questions that were submitted, a couple of these were answered already, but I think the first one that really struck me in light of the presentation was, what are the potential roadblocks that you all are facing at Habitat? So this question is for Sarah. To having more of these projects, and what can the county do, or what can we do as residents of the county to help address those roadblocks?
Sure. So I think in terms of blocks for us, it's really access to opportunity. Typically, that means land and access to subsidy dollars. Those are always the two main issues, particularly around homeownership. And I know I mentioned the low-income housing tax credit program, which is a major financing driver for affordable rental housing. Senator Cardin has sponsored for a number of years a bill around the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. This actually has bipartisan support both in the Senate and in the House, and we've been working to get it passed, but it would create a financing tool for homeownership very similar to LIHTC. And I think that's incredibly important. I think the county is doing a lot, and I think we need to make sure that the state and the federal government are also supporting ways to build and preserve homeownership as well. So I think supporting the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act is a huge piece. If we could get that funded and through at the federal level, that would provide financing locally. The state also passed the appraisal gap bill last year, which is very similar. It's a financing tool to help sort of incentivize investment to fund that gap between what it costs us to build and what you can actually sell for. Particularly in neighborhoods that have been previously redlined at the state level. And they are launching a pilot program with that this year, but continuing to fund that and continuing to really support and advocate for funding for programs like that, I think are really important. Because really the subsidy dollars on the homeownership side are a challenge. So continuing to make it easier to build affordable housing on publicly owned land and faith-owned land, which I know Councilmember Friedson has worked a lot on, and then increasing access to subsidy dollars are always our top two issues.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
The third issue, just to chime in, the third issue sometimes is zoning. And that's where, like Emery Grove, for instance, it wasn't just a money and a partnership and a subsidy challenge. It was a zoning challenge. That was, my role. Everybody had a role in that. It continues to have a role in that. And that, was essentially my role and the council's, first role. You have a funding role as our second role. But I don't want to lose sight of that either, because we do have some dynamics where sometimes the zoning does not support the changes that we would want, and so we have to make adjustments there too.
Excellent. I'm going to go down. There were a couple of sort of good questions that would fit as nice follow-ups, but I do see Margaret Hadley's question in the chat that I think is particularly prescient given the last response about how participants are chosen for these housing projects.
Sure. So anytime there's a home purchase opportunity available, we market it pretty widely across Montgomery County and Prince George's County. And folks apply to us just like they would a bank to purchase a home. And then we review all applications, and all qualified applications go to a family selection committee. And through a blind process, so they don't see names or ages or any sort of identifying information, they select the buyers for each property that we have available. I'm not entirely certain how that selection process happens on the rental side as it relates to Randolph Road, but I'd be happy to connect folks with our partner AHC on that as well.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say, I mean, the main problem here, you'll hear it a lot, is we have a supply and demand problem. So whether it's the private market without subsidies, there's not enough supply for the demand that there is for housing at every income level and every affordability level. The same is true for subsidized programs. So there's another question in here from Nancy School, I believe, if I saw in the chat, about housing vouchers, which is not the only tool, but is one major tool that's federally subsidized. We have a wait list of over 27,500 people that are on it. It will take somebody on average almost 7 years to get off that wait list. It's horrible. And we have been advocating, there has been efforts at the federal level to dramatically increase vouchers. That has not happened. It was part of some of the previous packages during the response to COVID and the in terms of human infrastructure. But up to this point, it hasn't happened. So regardless of whether you're talking about MPDUs, the moderately priced dwelling units, whether you're talking about housing vouchers, whether you're talking about any other type of subsidy, the need and the wait lists are exponentially longer than the available units. Some of that is funding, some of that is just the reality of timing and how long. Habitat is amazing, but can't build tens of thousands of units at a time. It is with tender love and care. They work on projects and provide significant amounts of support and counseling and other efforts. It's a cumbersome process, and we don't have enough. So I just the main issue here is there isn't enough to provide. I'll also note, just because it's the UpCounty group, Germantown is actually the highest receiving area for housing vouchers. So there is some positivity, and I see Linda somewhere said, what about Poolesville? We have some of the most affordable housing. That is true. Proportionally and comparatively, UpCounty is way better than Down County. There's a ton of data to support that. But it's still not affordable to most people. So yes, it is significantly better, and there are a lot of positive stories and reasons why people would want to be in the UpCounty, and we need to talk about that more. But the reality is, it's still out of reach for too many people, and so that's where you're seeing a greater focus and investment in subsidized housing in the UpCounty. Previously, it was, well, the UpCounty is more affordable, let's focus Down County, and there was reasons for that, but that view has changed. And as I mentioned, with all of the affordable housing projects, Emery Grove that we mentioned, but HOC's project in Clarksburg, there's starting to be a much bigger focus on UpCounty, recognizing that our affordable housing needs are not acute to one community or one neighborhood, or certainly are not exclusively inside the Beltway. They're countywide.
Excellent. I'm so glad you brought that up, because we did have a question specifically about the HOC vouchers and what's being done to supplement that, to help people get off those wait lists. And what sort of a follow-up to that was pre-submitted was, what possibility is there that the state would step in to help buy down the price of some units in new high-rise construction? So Andrew, I'll go to you for that question.
Yeah, all right. So I'm trying to unpack it. What you're suggesting in terms of new high-rise construction and buying down the cost, that's literally what the MPDU program does. So our moderately priced dwelling unit was the first of its kind in the country. We used to lead on all of these issues. We are starting to lead once again, but we had a long period of time in the middle, frankly, where we weren't leading, where we were kind of resting on our laurels. And we're not unique in that. Most suburban and urbanizing jurisdictions, really weren't building enough housing and doing enough innovation for about a 30-year period, and we are paying the consequences for that, unfortunately. But that is the inclusionary model. That is the entire basis of the MPDU program, which is that when a new unit is constructed, a large unit, not if you're building 1 or 2 units, but a larger unit, that whether it's a detached single family, a townhouse community, or an apartment building, high rise or otherwise, that you have to dedicate a portion of those. Those are not subsidized with public dollars. Those are subsidized by the development itself. Now, the good news, bad news there is, one, it creates a mixed income community, which is the goal. That's what we want. That all the data shows that the best outcomes come from mixed income communities, which we desperately want to create. The challenge, though, is it does drive up the cost of the other units. And so there is a breaking point at which you are hurting overall affordability in order to subsidize. And so it doesn't work forever. So we generally require, it used to be 12.5%. In most places, it's 15% now, certainly in the high income areas, and most new master plans. There are certain elements that will raise it to 25%, by offering other benefits. But once you go well beyond 25%, if you're not directly subsidizing that with public dollars, you're significantly increasing the cost for all the other housing and making it totally unaffordable to most people, which is a bad outcome also. So it's finding that right sweet spot and then subsidizing the rest. Sarah mentioned to you, when you're talking about new construction, how expensive it is and how much subsidies are needed to make it affordable to residents at lower income levels. And Habitat, as you heard, is doing it for some of the most deeply affordable and most vulnerable people in the community. But it's incredibly expensive, and there's no such thing as affordable housing that isn't subsidized. It either has to be private philanthropy dollars, public dollars, or almost always a combination of both.
Excellent. And Joyce, who had pre-submitted the question, added into the chat that as a clarification, the question's about sort of SSI, folks who are on SSI. So I'm wondering if there's more.
Yeah, so Main Street is a good example of that in Rockville, Joyce, which I'm sure you're familiar with. This is an affordable housing project that also layers on accessibility and a focus on creating an inclusive community for individuals with disabilities. At the state level, I helped launch the ABLE program, Achieving Better Life Experiences, a disability savings program, so very near and dear to my heart. There's a couple aspects of this. One is need, and the other is accessibility in general. So some of the retrofit programs that you heard Sarah talk about, a lot of those are related to accessibility improvements. I mean, some of them are updating the window and the roof, to make them not only greener but safer. But some of them are putting in a ramp, for instance, to allow somebody in a motorized or otherwise wheelchair to be able to access that home and to be able to stay in that home, where otherwise they would have to be in a more institutional format, which is not to their comfort level. So there's more I would love to do with a model like Main Street, which is both affordable and accessible. There are also areas that I'm working on and looking into to dramatically expand our Design for Life programs and universal design programs, because some of it is just the number of units that we have that are available to people of any means, but who have significant accessibility challenges. A roll-in shower, for instance, the width of the doorways, for instance. There are a number of examples of things that you can do that are not hugely expensive on the front end, but to retrofit are very cost prohibitive.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. My Wi-Fi is cutting in and out, so I'm gonna pass to Peter for a hot sec to take over the Q&A while I try to figure out what's going on. But thank you so much, Peter. I'll go to you for the next question.
All right. Well, like they say, it takes a village. So we've used the term affordable housing a lot. So I wonder, we have a pre-submitted question, if you could just take a second to define what the number is for what is affordable housing. How do we actually define that? And then maybe actually go a little bit further, how do we measure how the county is doing? What was our definition of success for the county in achieving our goals around affordable housing. So, how do we define it in the first case, and then how are we defining success?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question, a really important question. Generally, it depends on the program. And like I said, we have affordability challenges at every level, and I think they're all important personally. So my view has always been, we need deeply affordable, we need workforce housing, we need market rate housing, we need lots and lots of more housing to meet everybody based on their needs, so that the goal that Sarah talked about of everybody having safe, dignified housing is achievable. Generally, there is affordable housing is 80% and below. Deeply affordable housing is below 60% or sometimes below 50%. So there's deeply affordable, workforce, and then market rate. Generally, market rate is above, say, 120% of area median income. But it depends on who's defining it. So even in the COG, Council of Governments target, the COG target is not really getting into the weeds of deeply affordable housing and affordable housing. They're basically referring to the needs of housing in general, and then leaving it up to local jurisdictions and partnerships like the ones we talked about here to subsidize it. Because basically, you can't solve the affordable housing crisis without the supply of housing that you need. And then the question is, how much are you willing to subsidize it to buy it down to the affordability level that you want? And that's really the question. So, for instance, at the Council of Government target, their 75% affordable number is not the affordability number that we've been talking about here. It's below 150% of area median income. So you're talking about 150,000 to 175,000, depending on what type of family you're talking about. So a different standard. So, but the bottom line is, people get really caught up on, oh, well, that's not affordable, or what does affordability mean? It's the same thing of like, what does luxury housing mean? Well, any unit that you have seen marketed that's new is marketed as a luxury unit. If it's new, it's a luxury unit, whether it's subsidized and affordable or whether it's market rate. If it rents for $7,500 a month or $750 a month, it will be marketed as luxury. That's not really the point. The point is, what is the subsidy level that allows it to be affordable, and at what income threshold? And that's a case by case, program by program determination.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think the way that we look at it, because there are so many different definitions to affordability, as Councilmember Friedson mentioned, is that a household shouldn't be paying more than 30% of their income on housing. No matter what income level they're at, that's what's considered affordable. And so we really look at it as housing affordability, and that's that 30% threshold as a percentage of your income.
Yes, and sorry, thank you for clarifying. When I was referring to where you are of area and median income and what rent you can afford or what mortgage payment you can afford, that's the standard that everybody basically uses. But exactly what program is serving what population, that's where it really is a case by case basis. But I think Sarah's point is very important.
Great. Well, we have another question about the relationship between what we can do at the county level, but we also have very large municipalities, Rockville and Gaithersburg, with their own zoning authority as well, and that's impact on the housing market. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about how we or how you are currently sort of working across those multiple jurisdictions to achieve our goals throughout the county on affordable housing.
Yeah, well, obviously the municipalities are huge and important partners. They have their own zoning authority. They have their own housing targets when we're talking about Gaithersburg and Rockville. So it is, it's not direct dynamics between the county and them, but it's direct between nonprofit partners in them. So the idea of partnership, the idea of the need to move forward with the public-private partnerships, that's as true for Gaithersburg and Rockville as it is for the county. I'll also say sometimes we follow them and adopt something that they have undertaken in their jurisdiction, and sometimes they follow us. And so it is a synergistic relationship and is very important. When I mentioned earlier the Council of Governments housing targets, there is a region-wide target, there is a county-wide target, and then there's a county government, Rockville and Gaithersburg, and Tacoma Park, municipal target. So they have their own targets that are held accountable as we are to those targets, but obviously we have to work together on it. And I personally very much value my relationship with them. One example I'll give on this is the right of first refusals. We're talking about, working together with Rockville Housing Enterprises as an example of an organization that wants to be part of right of first refusals. And so we're kind of coordinating through that and working through that to see how that would work. Traditionally, Housing Opportunities Commission, the county's public housing agency, has had that authority, but not the municipal housing agency. And we're having conversations right now of whether or not that would help and how that would work.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. Geez, almost 2024 and still can't figure out how to come off mute. So I was asking Sarah if you had anything else to add. If not, I think we got time for maybe 1.5, 2 more, probably maybe only one more question. So I want to focus back to the UpCounty, since this is the UpCounty Democrats. So what can be done to increase the stock of affordable housing, specifically in the UpCounty? What are some other existing programs and partnerships you'd like to leverage or create to make that happen? So this great audience of active Democratic voters in the UpCounty, what should we be thinking about and how can we support it?
Well, I'll start. First is building on what we've been doing and making sure that the focus remains, also including the UpCounty. As I mentioned earlier, that is a change in some ways in recent years, which I think is a very important and very positive change. The Emery Grove project is amazing. I think and hope that we can do more of them. Obviously, that's a massive undertaking and has required visionary leadership from Pastor Warner and others and Habitat, who really have advanced that along with HOC. The faith-based zoning text amendment that I mentioned earlier that I'm working with Kate Stewart, stand by on that. That's going to come out here very soon. I see that as a huge opportunity. The first frontier for me was county-owned land. The second frontier is land held by mission-based organizations that want to use it for affordable housing, but don't necessarily have the means or the opportunity to use it. And the zoning text amendment is intended to help facilitate that. The UpCounty will be a major beneficiary of that. We have some very significant opportunities in the UpCounty. And it's important to note that when you talk about the UpCounty, you have an ag reserve and you have a lot of HOAs where affordable housing is very challenging in HOAs because of covenants and other types of restrictions. And so leveraging faith-based land is really one of the key areas in the UpCounty that you're going to be able to move the needle in a significant way. And so I'm very excited about that and see the UpCounty as a major beneficiary of that effort.
Yeah, and I think I would just add, I agree with everything the council member said, and focusing on preservation as well. So really, it's been a challenge to understand the need for preservation and to get data around how many folks need help preserving their homes. But as much as we can, focusing in on making sure that we can help folks stay in their homes as well. So increasing access to those dollars and making sure that the programs that already exist that are really fantastic are marketed and communicated to folks as much as possible.
That program that Sarah was talking about earlier, the HARP program, the Housing Accessibility Rehab Program, that is a good example something that we were doing that was working, but we weren't funding it enough. And I think we have to do more of this, of really looking at, okay, what's working? Let's double down on that. What's not working? Let's stop funding that. It's not working. And we were only putting in $300,000 into that HARP program, and Habitat and Rebuilding Together were our two major nonprofit partners that were leveraging those funds in amazing ways, but in such limited fashion. And so that's where, I came in and said, well, why don't we, how much can you handle? And the answer was about $1.5 million, we think, right now. And so I said, okay, great. Let's take $1.5 million and let's do it. And it's working in an amazing way. Now we can do that 100 different times in 100 different ways. But in order to do it with fidelity, from my perspective, we also have to find the things that aren't working and stop doing the things that aren't working, that aren't moving the needle, that aren't making a difference. And I think if we can combine those two things, we could really move the needle in a significant way.
Great. Well, we always try to end these on time so folks can get on with their day. So I'd like to invite folks to unmute themselves and say thank you to our speakers. Give them a round of applause, as always, for joining us on a Monday morning, especially a chilly one like today. Also, just take a second to say it was great seeing many of you in person at the gala last month. If you enjoy seeing people in person and in person for a good cause, then I invite you to join the Montgomery County Democratic Party's holiday party and gift drive. Details are in the newsletter. It is Sunday, the 3rd. I'm going to forget the exact location. So just make sure to look at maybe someone else can put it in the chat. Sorry. But Sunday the 3rd, details are in the newsletter. Hopefully everybody is signed up and getting our amazing newsletter. But thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Thank you very much to our guests, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Walter Johnson High School. Thank you, Dolly. Sorry, my brain
Thank
just
you.
escaped me.